Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. The Scorpion King is a 2002 action-adventure film directed by Chuck Russell. The movie stars Dwayne Johnson, credited at the time as The Rock, in his first leading role, alongside Stephen Brand, Kelly Hu, Grant Heslov, and Michael Clarke Duncan in supporting roles. Serving as both a prequel and a spin-off to the Mummy franchise, the film expands the story introduced in The Mummy Returns. With Johnson reprising his role as Mathayus, it also launched the Scorpion King film series, set approximately 5,000 years before the events of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. The story explores the origins of Mathayus and his rise to power as the legendary Scorpion King. The title is inspired by the historical King Scorpion, a ruler from Egypt's proto-dynastic period. Released by Universal Pictures on April 19, 2002, The Scorpion King received mixed reviews from critics but performed well at the box office, earning $178.8 million worldwide against a production budget of $60 million. The story takes place long before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. A powerful army from the east, led by the ruthless Memnon, has conquered most of the surrounding tribes. No one dares challenge him because his mysterious sorcerer can predict every attack before it happens. Mathayus, along with his half-brother Jessup and their friend Rama, are the last surviving Akkadian assassins. The three warriors are hired by King Pharaoh of the remaining free tribes to eliminate Memnon's sorcerer and give the resistance a chance to fight back. The Akkadians successfully sneak into Memnon's camp, but their mission quickly falls apart when King Pharaoh's son, Takmuth, betrays his own people after murdering his father. Warned of the assassination attempt, Memnon's guards launch an ambush. Rama is killed during the attack, and Jessup is captured. When Mathayus finally reaches the feared sorcerer, he is surprised to discover that the mysterious prophet is actually a young woman named Cassandra. Choosing mercy over murder, he spares her life, but both of them are soon captured by Memnon's forces. After being forced to watch his brother Jessup's execution, Mathayus is buried up to his neck in the scorching desert, left to die under the relentless sun and become prey for the deadly creatures that roam the wasteland. After surviving a brutal attack involving deadly fire ants, Mathayus escapes with the help of a fellow prisoner, a horse thief named Arpid. Determined to honor his fallen brother, he vows to complete the mission they started together. With assistance from a clever street orphan named Tudu, Mathayus secretly infiltrates Memnon's heavily guarded fortress, Gamara. Inside the stronghold, Memnon's court magician, Philos, who secretly opposes his ruler, guides Mathayus toward the training courtyard where Memnon is preparing for battle. However, the plan takes an unexpected turn when Mathayus must double back to rescue Tudu, forcing him into a daring escape. During the chaos, he also kidnaps Cassandra. Furious over Cassandra's abduction, Memnon dispatches his elite warrior Thorak and a squad of soldiers to retrieve her and eliminate Mathayus using deadly scorpion venom. During a violent sandstorm, Mathayus lures Thorak and his men into a nearby cave, where he single-handedly defeats them all, before dying. However, Thorak manages to poison him. Believing that Mathayus represents the world's greatest hope of defeating Memnon and restoring peace, Cassandra uses her mystical powers to heal him. Though she never openly admits it, she has fallen in love with Mathayus after he spared her life and rescued her from Memnon, who had kept her captive since childhood. Mathayus, Arpid, and Cassandra later reunite with Philos, who has successfully created a powerful explosive powder. Before they can act, they are captured by the free tribes, now led by the formidable Nubian king, Balthazar. Mathayus defeats Balthazar in single combat, earning his respect and the protection of his people. Soon afterward, Cassandra experiences two disturbing visions. In one, Manon and his army massacre the entire rebel camp. In the other, Mathayus dies while confronting Manon, refusing to accept that fate is already written. Mathayus assures Cassandra that he will forge his own destiny. The two grow even closer and spend the night together. The following morning, Cassandra secretly returns to Manon's palace, hoping to kill him herself and prevent her visions from coming true. Suspicious of her loyalty, Manon tests her prophetic abilities by placing 6 urns before her. 2 are empty, while the remaining 4 conceal deadly cobras. Meanwhile, Mathayus launches a full-scale assault on Manon's fortress with the help of Balthazar, Arpid, Philos, and the united rebel forces. During the fierce battle, Balthazar kills Tukmut, avenging the death of his friend Fran. As the fighting reaches its climax, one of Manon's guards shoots Mathayus with an arrow, fulfilling Cassandra's prophecy. Believing victory is finally his, Manon lowers his guard. At that moment, Cassandra kills the archer, giving Mathayus the chance to pull the arrow from his back, retrieve his bow, and fire one final shot. The arrow strikes Manon, sending him tumbling from the palace roof to his death. With Manon defeated, Philos and Arpid use the explosive powder to destroy the palace's foundations, bringing the tyrant's stronghold crashing down. The surviving soldiers surrender and bow before Mathayus, proclaiming him the Scorpion King according to their ancient law. In the aftermath of the battle, Mathayus and Balthazar part ways in peace as Balthazar returns to his kingdom. Cassandra warns that this era of peace and prosperity will not last forever, but Mathayus remains confident that he will continue to shape his own future and create his own destiny. The Scorpion King began production as a spin-off of The Mummy Returns, 2001, expanding the story of Mathayus, the memorable warrior portrayed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. After the character's popularity in The Mummy Returns, Universal Pictures decided to develop an origin story set in an earlier historical period, broadening the world of the Mummy franchise. The film marked Johnson's first leading role in a major feature film, with him reprising the title character introduced in The Mummy Returns. For his performance, Johnson earned $5.5 million, setting a record at the time for the highest salary ever paid to a first-time lead actor. It was a remarkable leap from the $500,000 he received for his smaller role in the previous film. Produced on a budget of approximately $60 million, The Scorpion King was positioned as one of Universal Pictures' major action releases. Capitalizing on Johnson's worldwide popularity as a professional wrestler, the studio adopted an aggressive international release strategy, debuting the film simultaneously across 11 overseas markets. Dwayne Johnson's popularity in more than 130 countries played a major role in the film's global marketing campaign, helping introduce him as a leading international action star. The Scorpion King was released on April 19, 2002, across the United States, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Hong Kong, Malaysia, the Philippines, Russia, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Thailand. It later arrived on DVD and VHS on October 1, 2002, followed by a Blu-ray release on July 22, 2008. Becoming one of Universal Pictures' earliest Blu-ray titles, the film was eventually released in 4K Ultra HD on June 18, 2019. The movie also inspired 2 video game adaptations: The Scorpion King, Rise of the Acadian, released for the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2, serves as a prequel to the film. A second game, The Scorpion King, Sword of Osiris for the Game Boy Advance, continues the story after the movie. In the sequel, Cassandra is kidnapped by the ruthless sorcerer Mentu and his servant, the witch Isis, who is unrelated to Queen Isis from the film. This forces Mathayus to embark on a dangerous quest to find the legendary Sword of Osiris, defeat Mentu and Isis, and rescue Cassandra. At the box office, The Scorpion King opened with $12.55 million on its first day and earned $36.08 million during its opening weekend from 3,444 theaters across the United States and Canada, averaging $10,475 per theater. It debuted at number 1 at the North American box office and set a new record for the biggest April opening weekend, surpassing The Matrix. The record stood for only 1 year before Anger Management claimed the title in 2003. Internationally, the film collected $10 million during its first 5 days from 1,097 screens, finishing at number 1 in 9 of the 11 markets where it opened. It also set a record for the highest non-holiday opening in Singapore with $591,000. In its second weekend, domestic earnings dropped by 50%. But the film remained at the top of the box office with another $18.38 million. At the same time, it expanded into 35 international markets, where it earned an additional $12 million. The film completed its theatrical run on June 27, 2002, with $91.05 million in the United States and Canada and $87.75 million from international markets. Its worldwide total reached $178.8 million against a production budget of $60 million, making it a moderate commercial success. Critically, The Scorpion King received mixed reviews. It holds a 40% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 134 reviews, with an average score of 4.9. The site's critical consensus describes it as an action-adventure film that embraces over-the-top entertainment, though often in a cheesy way. On Metacritic, the film earned a weighted average score of 45 out of 100, based on 30 reviews, indicating mixed or average reactions. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave the movie a respectable B grade. Film critic Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the movie 3 out of 4 stars. He praised its willingness to embrace its own silliness, noting that while the plot was familiar, the non-stop action, self-aware humor, and Dwayne Johnson's charismatic performance made it an entertaining experience. Ebert also predicted that Johnson would go on to become a successful and long-lasting action star. James Berardinelli of Reviews was less impressed, giving the film 2 out of 4 stars and arguing that although entertaining action-adventure films of this type can be made, The Scorpion King fell short of its potential. Dennis Harvey of Variety offered a positive review, highlighting the film's energetic stunt work and the cast's physical performances, which he felt were more exciting than its computer-generated effects. Nathan Merbeen of the AV Club described the movie as a typical summer blockbuster fun while it lasts, easy to enjoy, and quickly forgotten. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly gave it a C+, calling the story predictable but praising Dwayne Johnson for carrying the film with his screen presence. Not all critics were convinced. Jonathan Foreman of the New York Post criticized the film for lacking the grand scale, originality, and memorable excitement that made Conan the Barbarian such an enduring fantasy adventure. Despite its mixed critical reception, The Scorpion King earned a nomination for Best Fantasy Film at the Saturn Awards. However, it lost to The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, another fantasy epic that also featured actor Bernard Hill. The Scorpion King blends historical inspiration with imaginative storytelling to create a fictional adventure set in ancient Egypt. Although the film borrows ideas from mythology and history, it clearly favors action and fantasy over historical accuracy. Dwayne Johnson stars as Mathayus, a character loosely inspired by the legendary King Scorpion, a ruler from Egypt's pre-dynastic period. Historians believe King Scorpion played an important role in strengthening power in southern Egypt before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, an event that marked the beginning of Egypt's first dynasty around 3150 BCE. Some scholars have suggested a possible connection between King Scorpion and King Narmer, who is traditionally credited with unifying Egypt. Although this theory remains uncertain, archaeological discoveries, including the famous scorpion Mathayus found at Hierakonpolis, support the existence of King Scorpion. While the film's storyline about bringing Egypt's tribes together loosely reflects the historical unification of the kingdom, it is ultimately a work of fiction centered on myth, adventure, and heroic fantasy. In the movie, Mathayus is portrayed as an Akkadian assassin hired to eliminate Memnon, a ruthless ruler determined to dominate the divided tribes of Egypt. This version of the character differs significantly from the historical King Scorpion. The film also creates its own mythology surrounding scorpions. While the real king's association with the creature comes from symbols found on ancient artifacts, the movie invents a fictional backstory involving scorpion venom to strengthen Mathayus' connection to the legendary creature. Many of the film's major characters are entirely fictional. Cassandra, a gifted sorceress with prophetic powers, and Memnon, the main antagonist, have no historical counterparts. Although ancient Egyptian rulers often consulted priests, seers, and oracles, Cassandra's supernatural abilities were created purely to enhance the film's fantasy elements. Likewise, there is no historical evidence of a ruler named Memnon opposing King Scorpion. Director Chuck Russ openly acknowledged that the film prioritized entertainment and visual spectacle over historical authenticity. Some modern-looking details, including the characters' grooming and appearance, were intentionally designed to appeal to contemporary audiences. While ancient Egyptians were known to remove body hair and wear lightweight clothing suited to the hot climate, the film takes considerable creative liberties with these historical practices. The release of The Scorpion King in 2002 coincided with growing public interest in the historical King Scorpion. That interest was further boosted by the History Channel documentary The Real Scorpion King, which aired the same month. Universal Pictures also clarified that the movie was not intended to portray the real historical ruler or accurately represent archaeological discoveries. After the film's success, plans were initially announced for a sequel starring Dwayne Johnson as Mathayus, who would face a new villain named Sargon. However, those plans were eventually cancelled. Instead, the franchise continued with a series of direct-to-video films. The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior was released in 2008, starring Michael Copon as Mathayus and Randy Couture as Sargon. This was followed by The Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption in 2012, with Victor Webster taking over the role of Mathayus and Billy Zane playing the villain, King Talus. The fourth installment, The Scorpion King 4, Quest for Power, arrived in 2015. Victor Webster reprised his role as Mathayus, joined by Michael Biehn, Rutger Hauer, Lou Ferrigno, and former WWE superstar Eve Torres. Will Kemp portrayed the film's main villain, Drazen. The fifth and final installment, The Scorpion King, Book of Souls, was released in 2018. Zach McGowan played Mathayus, while Peter Mensa portrayed the villain Nebsrek. In November 2020, Universal Pictures announced that a reboot of The Scorpion King was in development. Jonathan Herman was attached as the screenwriter, with the story expected to reimagine the Scorpion King legend in either a modern-day setting or a futuristic era. Dwayne Johnson signed on as a producer alongside Danny Garcia and Hiram Garcia through 7 Bucks Productions, in partnership with Universal Pictures. A year later, Hiram Garcia confirmed that the project was still actively in development. Before leading his own film, Dwayne Johnson made his memorable big-screen debut as the fearsome Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns. Although his appearance was brief, his powerful screen presence left a lasting impression. Producer Kevin Messer recalled being amazed by Johnson's charisma during the early footage, saying that even while delivering his dialogue in ancient Egyptian, he commanded the screen with remarkable confidence and intensity. Development on the project began almost immediately, leading to the creation of The Scorpion King, an action-packed spin-off and prequel that explores the origins of its legendary hero more than 5,000 years in the past. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stars as Mathayus, a powerful Akkadian assassin hired by a coalition of rival tribes. Desperate to stop the ruthless tyrant Memnon, who is systematically destroying their clans. The tribes unite for one final attempt to end his reign. Memnon's army has remained undefeated largely because of Cassandra, a beautiful sorceress whose prophetic vision throughout the film's brisk 89-minute runtime. Their relationship develops as the conflict steadily builds toward an epic final confrontation between Mathayus and Memnon. The story also highlights themes of compassion and honor. Mathayus spares several defeated enemies, many of whom later become trusted allies. At one point, he chooses to rescue a young boy rather than take a clear shot at Memnon, demonstrating that protecting innocent lives matters more than revenge. During the battles, the heroes repeatedly risk their own safety to protect one another. Cassandra urges Memnon to abandon violence, insisting that killing can never bring lasting peace. She also stands by Mathayus, risking her own life twice to save him. When warned that confronting Memnon will lead to his death, Mathayus refuses to accept fate, declaring, "I make my own destiny." His ultimate goal is not simply victory, but the creation of a peaceful kingdom. The film incorporates elements of ancient polytheistic beliefs, with frequent references to various gods. Cassandra's supernatural abilities are central to the story. She performs mystical rituals, including using an ancient form of divination similar to Ouija to summon visions. At other times, she enters trance-like states or channels healing powers. The movie also contains a fair amount of suggestive content. Cassandra appears nude in several scenes, although her body is strategically concealed by her hair or surrounding objects, keeping the film within its PG-13 rating. The story implies that her prophetic powers are tied to her virginity, which she eventually gives up after falling in love with Mathayus. Other scenes feature suggestive material as well. Nubian King Balthazar is shown waking beside two women, while many female characters including warriors wear revealing outfits. A group of prostitutes openly propositions Mathayus in a marketplace, and he later finds himself in a harem filled with eager women. In another scene, a young boy tosses a coin into a wishing well, prompting Cassandra to emerge nude from the water, though she is only shown from behind. During a scene in which she treats Mathayus' injuries, her position over him carries clear sexual undertones. Violence is by far the film's most dominant element. The Scorpion King features one of the highest body counts among action films of its time. Less than a minute into the movie, a man is struck in the face with a flying metal star, immediately establishing the film's intense tone. Although the violence is relatively light on blood, the action is nearly non-stop. Characters are repeatedly killed with arrows, swords, knives, axes, and other weapons. Victims are thrown from the great heights, decapitated, impaled, or cut down during large-scale battles. One ambitious prince boasts of murdering his own father and displays a severed head as proof. Some of the more graphic moments, including the death of Mathayus' brother by a slit throat, occur just off-screen but remain easy to imagine. Several soldiers are swallowed by quicksand, while another is impaled on a stalagmite, adding to the film's relentless sequence of violent encounters. The film features relentless action, with villains being defeated through brutal hand-to-hand combat, hangings, attacks by swarms of deadly fire ants, and a fiery explosion during the final battle. Violence is directed at both men and women, and even children are caught up in the conflict. Revenge is one of the story's strongest motivations. Mathayus is driven by the murder of his brother, while Balthazar openly enjoys taking revenge on a traitor before killing him. Although presented as heroes, these characters cut through their enemies without much concern for morality or the consequences of their actions. The film also attempts to build a romance between the assassin Mathayus and the sorceress Cassandra. When the villainous Memnon discovers them together, he sarcastically remarks on their relationship. Yet, when you stop to think about it, they're an unusual pair of protagonists. Mathayus is essentially a professional killer, while Cassandra possesses mysterious supernatural powers. Despite this, the story encourages viewers to see them as heroes. Perhaps even more troubling than the questionable morality is the film's constant blend of graphic violence and occasional sexual content. The combination feels carefully designed to appeal to young teenage audiences by delivering an endless stream of adrenaline-fueled entertainment. Although The Scorpion King is not particularly strong as a film, it marked an important step in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's acting career. His commanding screen presence suggested he had the potential to become the next major action star in the tradition of Arnold Schwarzenegger. A considerable amount of money clearly went into the film's production. The elaborate sets, costumes, locations, and visual effects create an impressive spectacle. Even so, audiences often found themselves laughing at the movie rather than with it. Largely because of its weak script, the story is extremely thin, with dialogue that rarely rises above simple one-word reactions and cliché copyright. Ironically, the promotional comic book released alongside the movie sometimes feels as though it contains more substance than the screenplay itself. Imagine removing the morally grounded archaeologist from the Mummy films and replacing him with a ruthless assassin, and you have a good idea of what The Scorpion King delivers. The story opens with Mathayus, his brother, and another surviving Akkadian assassin launching a savage attack on a Viking village. The sequence is packed with action but offers little narrative purpose beyond showcasing violence. The film then shifts to a camp where representatives of several defeated tribes gather to discuss their common enemy. Their aging leader urges everyone to unite, but Balthazar, played by Michael Clarke Duncan, refuses to work alongside the Akkadians, whom he views as nothing more than trained assassins. Eventually, the tribes agree to hire Mathayus and his companions to eliminate Cassandra, the sorceress whose visions help the tyrannical King Memnon remain undefeated. The assassins infiltrate Memnon's Egyptian-inspired fortress, but the mission quickly falls apart when they are betrayed by the son of the tribal leader. To prove his loyalty, the young traitor murders his own father and presents the severed head to Memnon. Mathayus is captured, but Cassandra persuades Memnon not to kill him directly. Instead, the king buries him alive with only his head exposed, leaving deadly fire ants to finish the job. Fortunately, Mathayus is buried beside a captured thief, who manages to escape and rescue him. Together they return to the city, encountering a young pickpocket, several prostitutes, and the king's eccentric cordon vendor, who is experimenting with an early form of gunpowder. Mathayus eventually enters the royal harem, where more scantily dressed women flirt with him. Later, he kidnaps Cassandra, and the two flee into the desert while Memnon dispatches his elite soldiers to hunt them down. The film continues with one battle after another. Characters are slaughtered in fights that combine exaggerated swordplay with larger-than-life action, often resembling a mix of professional wrestling and classic swashbuckling adventures. At one point, Mathayus is struck by an arrow coated in scorpion venom. Cassandra revives him with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in a scene that many viewers found unintentionally humorous, prompting laughter in theaters. The story eventually returns to the city of Gomorrah, where Mathayus defeats Memnon and claims the title of the Scorpion King. Unfortunately, the plot rarely develops beyond a straightforward series of action sequences. The characters experience little meaningful growth, and many events seem to exist only to connect one spectacle to the next. In many ways, the film resembles Conan the Barbarian but without the same level of storytelling or character development. The action is clearly designed to showcase the visual effects rather than advance the narrative. Dwayne Johnson demonstrates undeniable charisma and physical presence, but as this was his first leading role, his acting still lacks polish. Stephen Brand delivers a respectable performance as King Memnon, although his lean appearance makes him seem physically outmatched by John Swain. The film also takes unusual liberties with geography and history. It jumps from Viking settlements to ancient Egypt and Gomorrah with little explanation, while characters travel surprisingly quickly, often by camel. The wide mix of ethnic groups and cultures feels historically inconsistent, given how isolated many of these civilizations would have been. Ultimately, The Scorpion King is designed as pure popcorn entertainment and succeeds best when viewed as a fast-paced fantasy adventure. It delivers impressive visuals and non-stop action but offers very little depth beneath the spectacle. Moral themes are largely absent. Wine, sensuality, bloodshed, and conquest dominate the story, creating a harsh world where only the strongest survive. In the end, once Mathayus defeats Memnon, the defeated king's followers immediately swear allegiance to their new conqueror. His rise to power is based not on compassion, wisdom, or honor, but simply on his ability to defeat the strongest warrior on the battlefield. The hero ultimately triumphs through sheer strength, with a little assistance from his ally, a mysterious sorceress. Although the script occasionally touches on themes of the occult and the worship of other gods, these elements remain relatively minor throughout the story. The sorceress possesses the ability to see the future, and the film presents this power convincingly enough that younger or more impressionable viewers might believe such abilities could exist in real life. The film's biggest concern, however, is its depiction of violence. The action is stylized and entertaining, making brutal combat appear exciting rather than dangerous. From backyard wrestling groups to school playgrounds, many children imitate this kind of action, often without understanding the real risks involved. Unlike the fictional fights that previous generations watched, today's imitation can result in genuine injuries. The dialogue doesn't always fare much better, since the Scorpion King is set thousands of years before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. The filmmakers wisely avoid trying to sound historically authentic. Instead, the characters often speak in surprisingly modern language, creating an intentionally light-hearted tone. At one point, there's even a joke about property values in Gomorrah, reflecting the movie's willingness to embrace its own silliness. The film wears its goofy charm like a badge of honor. Its story borrows heavily from familiar adventure films. The visual effects are uneven enough to inspire a smile, and the dialogue often sounds more like a modern sitcom than an ancient epic. The hero even refers to his camel as "my ride," perfectly capturing the movie's playful approach. The film stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, already famous as a WWF wrestling superstar, with wrestling promoter Vince McMahon serving as one of the producers. Based on his performance, Johnson proves he has the charisma to lead action films of this kind. The story takes place long before the events of The Mummy Returns, 2001, when the character was still a heroic warrior rather than the monstrous Scorpion King seen in that film. This time, audiences can clearly see Johnson's face and impressive physique, a noticeable improvement over his earlier appearance, where much of his performance was hidden beneath a giant CGI scorpion body that resembled an oversized lobster. The villain, the ruthless King Memnon, played by Stephen Brand, relies on the visions of the sorceress, portrayed by Kelly Hu, to plan his military campaigns and conquer his enemies. The story then introduces three Arcadians, legendary assassins whose deadly skills have supposedly been passed down through generations. Their leader, Mathayus, played by Johnson, is portrayed as almost superhuman. Early in the film, he fires an arrow with such incredible force that it sends an enemy crashing through a wall and flying across the room, making his warning, "Don't touch the bow," seem entirely justified. Exactly how this heroic Mathayus eventually transforms into the monstrous Scorpion King seen in The Mummy Returns remains something of a mystery. As his journey continues, Mathayus loses some companions while gaining new allies, including a towering Nubian warrior played by Michael Clark Duncan, an inventor experimenting with gunpowder, a resourceful young boy, and a wisecracking horse thief. One memorable scene features the group swearing vengeance against Memnon. Mathayus declares, "As long as one of us still breathes, the sorcerer will die," a dramatic line that also contains an amusing logical contradiction. Eventually, Mathayus and his companions infiltrate Memnon's desert fortress. The sorceress, who feels like an early prototype of a James Bond heroine, quickly becomes interested in the rugged warrior and begins to question her loyalty to the much less impressive king. The action sequences throw the characters into one dangerous situation after another. They are launched through palace windows, tumble from towering walls, narrowly escape death from fire, giant scorpions, venomous cobras, swords, arrows, explosions, and even survive being buried up to their necks in the sand beside swarms of deadly fire ants, and that's before they even reach the infamous Valley of Death, whose name inspires one of the film's unintentionally humorous exchanges: "No one goes to the Valley of Death." That's why it's called the Valley of Death. Among all the movie's visual effects, perhaps the most remarkable achievement is how carefully the costumes of the many scantily dressed maidens remain just within the limits of the PG-13 rating, revealing plenty while never quite crossing the line. One character, played by Kelly Hu, is portrayed as a strikingly beautiful woman whose glamorous appearance often feels more carefully styled than practical. Even in scenes like descending a waterfall, her long, flowing hair somehow remains perfectly arranged, adding to the film's larger-than-life fantasy style. Did I enjoy The Scorpion King? Yes, I did. However, I didn't enjoy it enough to strongly recommend it. The film spends so much time trying to be fast-paced and energetic that it doesn't put the same effort into developing a smarter story. Still, it succeeds at what it sets out to be. Viewers who aren't interested in this kind of action movie probably won't watch it in the first place. After all, it's hard to imagine anyone seeing a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie like The Scorpion King by accident. For its target audience, the film delivers exactly what's expected: plenty of action, martial arts, explosions, and a few laughs. The energy stays high from beginning to end, the action rarely slows down, and the dialogue is self-aware enough to have some fun with itself. Most importantly, Dwayne Johnson has the screen presence to carry the lead role. He handles the film's over-the-top moments with confidence while keeping a straight face, showing clear potential as a long-term action star. One memorable scene involves his character reading fire ants to survive, and Johnson sells the moment with such determination that you can almost imagine him thinking, "If I ever get out of this mess, I'm coming back with a feast instead of nibbling on a few ants." The Scorpion King also marks the unofficial beginning of the summer blockbuster season, a time traditionally filled with high-energy action films that prioritize spectacle over deep storytelling. As a prequel to The Mummy Returns, the movie explores how Mathayus, originally introduced as the Scorpion King, evolves from an assassin hired to kill the sorceress Cassandra into a hero who falls in love with her and eventually overthrows the ruthless ruler Memnon. The story itself is fairly straightforward, with little beyond the central premise. Its primary purpose is to establish Dwayne Johnson as a leading action star. Fortunately, he performs well in the role and demonstrates more acting range than many people expected at the time. His charisma and confidence help carry scenes that might otherwise feel predictable. The film features numerous battles and fight sequences, with swords, arrows, and hand-to-hand combat dominating the action. Despite the high body count, there is very little visible blood, a clear choice made to maintain the film's PG-13 rating. The sound design during the combat sequences is particularly effective, making each clash feel impactful. As a straightforward action-adventure, The Scorpion King is entertaining. However, it falls short when compared with The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. Both of those films featured stronger performances, more impressive visual effects, and a lighter comedic tone led by Brendan Fraser. This prequel lacks that same balance of humor and adventure. Dwayne Johnson could have benefited from a stronger screenplay. His background in professional wrestling had already shown his talent for delivering dry humor and entertaining monologues, yet the script gives him surprisingly few opportunities to showcase those skills. While the film includes a handful of jokes, they are too limited to fully take advantage of his natural charisma. Giving him more witty dialogue and character development would have made the story far more engaging. Even so, the movie hints at Johnson's potential as a versatile actor, with stronger writing and more substantial material. He seemed capable of succeeding in far more than straightforward action roles. Another weakness is the limited use of CGI and visual effects. While it's understandable that the film operated on a smaller budget than the Mummy films and relied heavily on Johnson's star power, the lack of impressive visual effects is noticeable. Expectations didn't need to match the scale of its predecessors, but a greater investment in CGI and spectacle would have helped the film feel more ambitious and visually exciting. Unlike the Mummy films, The Scorpion King features very little supernatural evil. The only magical element is the sorceress, whose ability to see the future serves as the film's primary connection to the mystical themes of its predecessor. If a sequel is ever made, it would greatly benefit from significantly improved CGI and visual effects. Overall, The Scorpion King is an average action-adventure film. While I enjoyed the Mummy movies more than most people, this spin-off falls well short of their quality. The film's biggest attraction is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, whose screen presence carries much of the movie, along with Kelly Hu, whose character is presented in revealing costumes throughout the film. It's encouraging that Hollywood gave Johnson the opportunity to launch his acting career, and hopefully he would go on to star in action films with stronger stories or even explore entirely different genres. With its simple plot and limited visual effects, The Scorpion King perfectly represents the traditional summer popcorn blockbuster. It isn't a film that demands much thought. Instead, it's designed for audiences who simply want to sit back, relax, and enjoy some straightforward entertainment. Despite its shortcomings, it marked the beginning of what looked like a promising, sequel-heavy summer movie season. If you're a fan of The Rock or you're simply looking for a fun, mindless action film to enjoy at the theater, The Scorpion King is worth watching. Interestingly, the film also serves as an early example of a Hollywood trend that many people mistakenly believe is new. While modern shared cinematic universes often receive criticism for introducing characters whose only purpose is to set up future movies, this strategy has existed for decades. Television has been using the concept commonly known as a backdoor pilot since the 1960s, and films have occasionally adopted the same approach. A perfect example arrived in 2001 with The Mummy Returns. As the film approached its theatrical release, one of its biggest marketing highlights was the debut of wrestling superstar The Rock as the Scorpion King. Although the character appeared only briefly and was represented during the climax by notoriously poor CGI, audiences were clearly being introduced to a future leading character. Universal hoped viewers would become invested enough to return less than a year later for a standalone prequel, giving The Rock his first opportunity to headline a major motion picture after making his big-screen acting debut in The Mummy Returns. From a financial standpoint, the results were mixed. The Mummy Returns earned approximately $433 million worldwide, while The Scorpion King brought in about $165 million globally, with roughly $91 million coming from the United States and Canada. Although $91 million was a respectable domestic total for 2002, it represented a significant drop from the success of its predecessor. There are several possible reasons for that decline. One is that The Scorpion King himself failed to leave much of an impression in The Mummy Returns, especially because the climactic CGI version of the character was widely criticized, even by the standards of early 2000s visual effects, and even compared to contemporary video games, the digital creature looked remarkably unconvincing. Another possibility is that audiences simply weren't eager for a standalone Scorpion King film. For many viewers, the character never generated enough excitement to justify an entire movie. As a result, The Scorpion King struggles not only as a spin-off but also as a prequel. Its portrayal of the title character bears little resemblance to the villain introduced in The Mummy Returns, aside from Dwayne Johnson's unmistakable physical presence. Rather than expanding the mythology in a meaningful way, the film ends up feeling disconnected from the very character it was meant to develop. An awful as an action-adventure set in a generic ancient Middle East and North Africa. Music. by which the film means that everything that isn't the desert ice of cities made out of sandstone. It's a little weird going back to this film years after beloved wrestler The Rock fully completed his transformation into a beloved comic action star Dwayne Johnson and realized that once upon a time he's a kind of trashy third-rate Conan the Barbarian. A_A is what Hollywood thought was the right use of his talents. It's not that he's exactly Bada in the role, though he is pretty Badina the Mummy Returns, if my years-old memories are right. It's just that he's a profoundly generic, ever since Johnson has successfully recalibrated his career from muscly to being in muscly movie acid to big comic cornball, which as I counted was hinted at in 2005's Be Cool. A started in earnest with 2008's Get Smart and was solidified no later than 2013's The Pain and Gain, in which being goofy while also being muscly was the joke. He has become such a big personality in on screen. We need not to commit to loving or hating this personality in order to agree that at least he's got a lot of it. Not so in The Scorpion King, which only gives him about 5 minutes to pal around with a dyed child and to demonstrate his big weightlifting teddy bear vibe. One opportunity to do that eyebrow thing that he does, and unless I have forgotten something, not one actual laugh line. He's basically just playing the guy with large arms and larger pecs, a role that has been written more or less the same way since the 1960s. And of course, why wouldn't that be the case? The track record for wrestlers turned actors has always been dire. So, why would the filmmakers want to risk having Johnson play anything other than a bland slab of perpetually underdressed beefcake intensely stating tedious expository lines before soulfully abetting the slightly less underdressed female lead? It's just weird to realize that the Scorpion King is sitting right on a secret weapon and is patently unaware of the fact. That's of minor historical interest, at best. What it leaves us with is a generic beefcake, the kind of movie that generic beefcakes tend to get cast in. Though I am paying The Scorpion King an unwarranted compliment by calling it generic. It's a pretty basic stuff many thousands of years ago. Unsurprisingly, the film is confused on the details. The phrase Scorpion King points to a pair of Egyptian rulers from around 5000 to 5200 years BP, and this accords with the Mummy Returns. But a big deal is made about how Johnson's character is Okadon, which makes it around 1000 years later. But what the hell? You can almost hear the screenwriters yawning. It's all ancient. An ancient tyrant named Stephen Brand, who is presumably from what is now Egypt, was laying waste over some region that we can pinpoint as either the Levant, Mesopotamia, or the Arabian Peninsula. Thrioidans, of whom only Mathayus Johnson will be around long enough to bother learning his name, have been hired as assassins by the people currently failing to fight off Menon's hordes, and they fail in this attempt. Mathayus commits himself to revenge after Menon kills his brother and kidnaps the warlord's virgin Sir Cassandra Kelly, who of course doesn't really want to serve Menon anyway but also doesn't much hold with being kidnapped. They end up finding their way along with excruciating comic relief arc Grant Heslov into the camp of anti-Mena resistance led by suspicious King Balthazar. Michael Clark Duncan and Mathayus has to prove himself trustworthy and capable enough to lead an assault against Menon's stronghold in the biblical city of Gomorrah, no less. This is the plot of basically every ancient world movie, right down to the Virgin Seer who will lose her powers after she has sex with the hero. Oops, spoiler alert. So, here's what I don't get. How did screenwriters Stephen Sommers, William Osborne, and David Herr working from a story treatment by Sommers and Jonathan Hales along with director Chuck Russell make such a hash out of it? You don't need to take my word for it. It's matter of record that the film was so undernourished that new material had to be written in the fly just to get it up to feature length, and I don't mean just. The theatrically released cut of the film is 92 minutes long. And while I greatly appreciate that, this is already suffocatingly boring 3 times over without trying to crack the 2-hour mark. It's not the kind of running time that a film with pretenses to epic adventure status was going to settle for in 2002. That's a chintzy B-movie running time, and to be sure, The Scorpion King is a chintzy B-movie, but it has some serious illusions of grandeur. Let's not lose the thread, though. The movie had to be reshed and padded out, and I imagine for this reason, it's more or less incomprehensible. The plot is again so boringly cliched that it almost doesn't bear talking about it, and there are dozens of models so one could copy, and yet somehow it's completely mystifying how we get from one point to the next at every point. Ida feels like we're all of a sudden in a new scene. Music. In a new location. Ida is the choppiest damn movie. It's no shock that's true of the editing editing. This was 2002 and a certain illegible flurry of shots was what you expected of lousy CGI heavy action bomb movies on steroids in 2002. But for the overall story structure to be choppy, now that's something. At any rate, it's hard to follow and doesn't reward the effort of following it. It's not good drama and it's not good a spectacle. The film is kind of scuzzy and washed out with a dirty yellow hue that only calls attention to how much of the movie takes place in the lifeless deserts of a sort that no human civilization would ever call home. It's how Americans imagine the ancient Middle East must have looked, so we're stuck with it. The sets are boring. The costumes, when they are more than loincloths, are colorless. The CGI is utterly hideous. Nothing is as bad as the Scorpion King effect from The Mummy Returns, largely because the Scorpion King mostly eschews any and all paranormal plot elements, just a Cassandra's psychic abilities, which is an odd choice for a movie that claims to be the origin story for a messed up Scorpion man, but it does mean that the film can limit its attention to mostly old-fashioned sword and sandal type of VFX work with fancy CGI left mostly for a touch-up detail. The creation of unbelievably shit-looking cobras and the like, the whole thing is a grating anti-fun mess with almost nothing entertaining in any way. Unless it's the limited amusement provided by the jarringly casual modern performances that Johnson and Duncan bring to bear in all their arch-ancient times dialogue. They're both extremely charismatic actors. Something not really true of anyone else in the cast. Bernard Hill, as the anachronistic inventor of gunpowder, at least has music. His cute grandpa thing, but the Scorpion King can't even figure out how to use charisma, and so they're both charmless and painfully straight-laced, but unable to find anything like the right kitsy vibe to at least pretend like it's several millennia ago. Did I say limited amusement? I suppose I meant cringy embarrassment. Which is to be sure the most active emotion the Scorpion King is ever able to spark, so better than nothing. The Scorpion King is a Conan movie all the way, a big, ridiculously over-muzzled hero, not so dim as everyone expects with a murdered brother to avenge, an evil warlord to defeat, a superb fighting skills, and a foolish weakness for women, a cowardly comedic sidekick who tags along to share in the spoils of his adventures, a loyal steed, a beautiful sorceress who starts out distrusting everybody, but gradually comes to like the hero so much that she risks her life to heal him from his injuries in the desert. Desperate tribes of people in need of leader, sword fights, chases, ancient citadels. Even the old man a favorite, the hero running along, taking shelter behind a rolling gong. We've seen it all before. But the remarkable thing is that the Scorpion King does it well and does Ida with such good humor that it is almost impossible to dislike. In the central role, The Rock, or Dwayne Johnson, as he now prefers to be known, perhaps the first time since Aliens that anybody has wanted to be called Dwayne, gives a surprisingly confident and convincing a performance. He's not required to stretch his acting talents, but he's noted just another wooden beast master. The film's main weakness is its villain who simply doesn't have the charisma to achieve a balance, nor to convince us a man who has led thousands into war. The film's strength is in its technical crew, whilst the direction is formulaic. It's always spot on, the pacing is superb, and the choreography, especially where multiple fights are going on at once, is exceptional. Those scenes are further enhanced by a clever use of lighting, something which made this film's predecessor, The Mummy, a standout from the crowd. This is not a deep film by any means, nor is it particularly memorable, but it's great at popcorn entertainment. Robert D. Howard would have been proud of for the most part. The Scorpion King is just what you think it will be, a series of smackdowns with opponents seen in barbarian garb and elaborately masculine, that is, large jewelry, with a time set aside for Dwayne Johnson to display his considerable self-love. True. Johnson plays a character who is not precisely the Rock who rides a camel and beds a pretty girl. Kelly who works his way through a plot that hasn't been written by the WWF scribes, but these details are incidental. He is the Rock, and that's what you're paying a cash money to see. That Vince McMahon executive produced surely has something to do with the film's more predictably pieces being in place. The plot concocted by David Hayter, Will Osborne, and Mummy Returns remaker Stephen Sommers from a story by Jonathan Hales is essentially extended backstory on Mathayus, who made his first brief and English-languageless appearance in The Mummy Returns. Now, you're reminded that he lives around 3000 BC as a member of a clan of cutthroats who kill for money, also known as Yeowadans. At the beginning of The Scorpion Music King, Mathayus is hired to assassinate Cassandra, who the gorgeous sorceress who foresees battle outcomes for the evil warlord Manon, Stephen Brand. Mathayus begins his mission full of sand, as theists say, but soon finds himself in love with Cassandra, whose near nudity, occasionally wet, remains within PG-13 range by strategic arrangement of long hair. Deciding to take out Manon instead of the woman as he comes to call her affectionately as in "I've come for the woman and your head." Mathayus faces down legions of red turban flunkies on a horseback, crashes through windows, fires torpedo-like arrows, blowing the adversaries through walls, chomps on menacing fire ants, and vows vengeance for his murdered brother. He also puts a sandstorm to good use and adopts as his requisite comic sidekick a nerdy horsey thief named Grant Heslov, who warns him that no one goes into the Valley of the Death. That's why it's called the Valley of the Death. Nothing stops Mathayus, though, by film's end. As convinced a whole squad of warriors to ride with him into the infamously raucous city of Gomer to set it straight to rescue Cassandra and beat down Manon. One of these new buddies is an initially antagonistic warlord, the Nubian Balthazar, Michael Clark Duncan. In fact, they become such good friends that Mathayus feels able to kid the mighty touchy Balthazar about his garish harem girl disguise, referring to him as a miss. All this is to be expected. The action scenes to the onliners to sidekicks to the deeming damsel in distress who proves quite capable of taking care of herself. Thank you. And yet, despite or because of its predictability and despite or because of its critical drubbing on its release, mainly by way of unfavorable comparisons to other primal barbarian movies of the Arnoldian kind, The Scorpion King is a smashing success. It crushed all the competition at the box office, making a whopping $36.2 million during its first weekend. Certainly, much of its appeal has to do with the Rock. Music. The coolest, smoothest WWF wrestler ever, the much beloved People's Champion. As the guy who wrestles while wearing his movie star sunglasses, whose singly arched eyebrow speaks the proverbial volumes, and who has never met a camera that hasn't drooled all over him. The Rock is a star straight up. The fact that he also appears to have a sharp sense of humor about his career, his long-standing theatrical conflict with McMahon, his incredible physique, and his own as yet limited acting ability certainly endears him to his fans and perhaps to those only considering becoming fans. But even as The Rock's total magnificence recalls the glory days of Schwarzenegger, There is something fundamentally and crucially different about this next generation of faction heroics. The shifting dimensions of race identifications and racial politics in the Rock's movie universe. And this is a universe that extends far beyond that of the still predominantly a white WWF. The Scorpion King is one amazing exemplary of race mixing and at some level even race rethinking. In part, how this is a function of the rush hour phenomenon, the sudden discovery by producers and greenlighters that a blockbuster hit might be made with stars who are not white. And beyond this, the villains can all be identifiably imperial. Minan speaks with a vaguely Euro-British accent, and his second, the insipid Prince Tuckmid, Peter Fanelli, currently starring in Fox's Fast Lane, might be reduced to this high concept, snotty class privilege as well. This shift is a function of a more general Beijing of race difference and The Rock's crossover celebrity, which tends to render race invisible, or at least undiscussed. He's been described in reviews of the film as charismatic and exotic without overt reference to his background, Miami, as the grandson of Samoan wrestler Peter Mathayus, who's Chinese, Hawaiian, and a British heritage. Moreover, the Good Guys team is primarily comprised of Fab Alphasers mixed-race Amazonian kickers, including Queen Isis Shri Howard, plus an older white guy scientist fellows Bernard Hill, who behaves more or less like the Professor on Gilligan's Island, Suto inventing a catapults and gunpowder, and quite pleasantly surprising himself when his experiments work out, as they infiltrate the castle and the film heads towards a slam-bang, hugely action-aided finale. Thea SK Motley Crue occasionally resemble Thea intrepid Posey in The Wizard of Oz, except that they spread out much like the characters in The Mummy Returns in a concerted effort to provide multiple climaxes. Isis and her girls battle a bunch of dead meat red turbans, while Caesar take us out that wussy boy Tuckmit, and Mathayus spends several delectably drawn-out moments with his arch-enemy, the egomaniacal slime ball, Manon, complete with the fearful moment when Cassandra's vision of her fabulous new boyfriend's death appears to come true, in slow motion with hair flying and flame as lighting up his perfectly oiled pecs. It's a beautiful and beautifully corny sight, visibly grander and costlier than The Rock might have managed in a wrestling arena. The investment pays off. Dwayne Johnson is well on his way to international superstardom, and perhaps action pictures are on their way to reflecting the vastly diverse audience they pursue so furiously. As I've to underline this fight, the Universal DVD, a gorgeous transfer, includes all kinds of extras, some more desirably than others. Some bonus materials area promotional and or superfluous. Spotlight on locations is a mini trilogue. Wholly corny trailers. Advanced the Universal theme park in the Scorpion King PlayStation game 2. Others area informational. Ancient World production and design highlights the work of designer Ed Rose and DP John Arlenetti's efforts to make Sodom and Gomorrah and Southern California. The special effects shows the development of the Cobras and the Fire Ants and a series of typed panels lay out the historical best guesses and myths surrounding the Scorpion King. A segment titled Preparing for the Fight is Russell describing his ideas concerning the fight scenes. First of all, every fight tells a story such that a concept and choreography come together. Outtakes include antics with camels and snakes, as well as a bit where Clark Duncan struggles briefly while mounting his horse, following his advice for Thea SK to rule well, as The Rock and Kelly who look on once astride. He looks down on The Rock and says, "Not missing a beat, remember, Nubia Nice will be watching you, Scorpion King." Solemn, and then a segment focusing on the relationship between the two actors replays another version of Thea's difficult mount with laughs accompanied by Russell's observation that the two actors were great friends and competitive as well, rehearsing theory moves for weeks, taunting each other and generally having a grand time on the disc. They're still arguing over whether The Rock knocked Mike out or knocked him down. Of all the extras though, Thea commentary tracks are the most pleasurable as well as enlightening. There are two: the enhanced feature commentary by The Rock, whom you can also see as he records the commentary live for some reason, and the apparently irregular one by director Russell, who is clearly thrilled with his good fortune. During The Rock's track, if you click an awesome sign in the corner, he'll appear occasionally in a pit box, while Thea movie runs. Music, wearing a soft brownish shirt and headphones. He looks up at an off-screen screen, telling you what an image might be establishing or that he really music, really likes a scene. He also reveals some tricks that enhance his performance as the SK. For instance, his snappy whistle is dubbed in or someone is off-screen poking a camel in the ass to get it to turn on cue. The most rock-like moments come when Johnson comments on his own Super G persona while he strides through a marketplace. A stunning prostitute offers to help him with his cramped muscles. On the commentary track, Johnson answers her, "No, you can't. Honey, they're not ready for the Scorpion King." Russell's comments are more concerned with his vision for the film with attention to the travails of working on a large-scale project. He talks you through the shooting schedule, experiences on the set, and his thinking about characters and actors, scenes, and stunts. He wanted to use as few camera tricks and wire gigs as possible in the fight scenes to maintain a visceral immediacy and real kinetic sense and to keep it from becoming so stylized that it became in ballet or an exhibition. The Rock, he says, and he calls him The Rock, has a deep commitment to acting, bringing as much passion to the role as he does to his athletic endeavors. Good to know. By the end of the film, Russell confesses, he added, the epilogue where everyone says goodbye and looks forward to making their own destiny as a curtain call for each of my characters. After an amazing multiplayer action sequence to show off The Rock's charisma very simply, he says, I wanted to have an opportunity to have The Rock smile. He played a really tough character the entire film, and in person, The Rock is a really charming guy, and I thought we ought to try to end the movie with a little of that charm. It's a good insight for that above all is what The Rock is cooking. I'm struggling manfully to avoid a review filled with wrestling references, so we'll keep this simple. Luckily, it's a pretty simple movie, hardly a dull moment, admittedly. Hardly any especially exciting or memorable ones either. The Rock plays the Mathayus, last of his tribe, an assassin hired to kill the evil warlord Manon Brand. When Mathayus' brother is killed, it all becomes rather more personal and sorceress Cassandra adds another dimension, or about 0.1 dimensions anyway, making fractionally over 2 in total. If this is no more than you'd expect, neither is it any less, and everyone involved treats the things with the correct level of seriousness. That is none at all. The PG-13 rating limits things somewhat. It only plays at being sexy and violent. There's no blood and the only nipples are The Rock's. Why you can't help wonder about the morals of a film which says sweeping across a continent to create an empire is bad, yet assassinating the emperor and ruling in his place is good. Noted that such thoughts deserve consideration, that the film gives theme a chance to arise is perhaps significant. However, it needs to be more absorbing instead of largely predictable. By the end, I was almost expecting Hulk Hogan to run in and bash The Rock from behind with a chair, between this and resisting the frequent urge to shout, Toby. It's questionable whether or not you might be better off watching Raw's War instead. If there was ever a franchise that did not need a spin-off, it was the Brendan Fraser series The Mummy. Somehow, Dwayne Johnson, then known solely as The Rock, made enough of an impression as a CGI'd head on a massive scorpion that Universal Pictures decided to give the wrestler-turned-actor his own sand and a sword-style movie. What they received was a generic, if not awful, fantasy film. It pretty much goes without saying that Dwayne Johnson is the best aspect of the whole series. But what the Scorpion King manages to do also demonstrate how far The Rock has come in terms of acting. Here he is a muscle-bound warrior delivering on one-liners and poorly written exposition. He does this well, and the star power even back in his very first major role is clear. This means that the action sequences in the battles between the Johnson's assassin for hire and the many faceless soldiers sent his way were all staged perfectly well. He is a competent action hero even then, and although his acting comes across as slightly forced, there is a charm to him that explains why he is such a success today. Unfortunately, his star power wasn't enough to build a whole movie around him, and the Scorpion King doesn't have enough to elevate it above B-movie levels. It has a despicable villain played with all the usual grimace and a snarl by Stephen Brand, as well as a damsel in distress who starts as a target for a hero and soon predictably becomes a love interest. The fact that she spends most of the film practically naked, wearing the most impractical clothes for a desert adventure should tell you all you need to know about the level that the Scorpion King is aiming for. The characters do their jobs and the actors play them alley. It doesn't save the writing though, which is full of cliché predictability and all the usual plot beats that we have seen 100 times before. Nothing here is surprising, but it never feels terrible either. It just plods along, happy to add to the many numbers of fantasy movies that are instantly forgettable. This is because it never aspires to be more than a B-movie and epic. If it wasn't for the starring role of Johnson or the links to a previous franchise, it seems that the movie would have fallen into bargain bins the world over, as did the non-roast starring sequels. This is demonstrated best when the CGI is used to proper effect, from unconvincing fire ants through to poorly realized snakes. The movie relies heavily on CGI at times and manages to break the suspension of disbelief by having such a proper representation of it. After the incredible success of last year's Mummy sequel, another foray into ancient Egypt was inevitable. But instead of the continued adventures of Brendan Fraser, The Scorpion King acts as a prequel to the events depicted in The Mummy Returns and even the first Mummy. The film opens with a spectacular sequence that finds Mathayus, played by, no surprise, The Rock, aka Dwayne Johnson, rescuing his brother from impending death. The film quickly shifts gears and we're soon introduced to Manan, Stephen Brand, an evil emperor bent on world domination. They always are really. Mathayus has no quarrel with Manan as a bounty hunter of sorts. He only hates who he's paid to hate. But Manan raises him when he murders someone close to him. So, not surprisingly, the rest of the film entails Mao's quest to kill Manan, the Scorpion King. By all rights, should be a terrible movie. The first two Mummy movies were overly top wall-to-wall special effects extravaganzas, but little else. Unconcerned with silly things like plot or character development, those films took off like a roller coaster and never looked back. So, it would have been reasonable to expect a similar structure from The Scorpion King, which was co-written, though not directed, by Stephen Sommers, the man responsible for The Mummy and its sequel. But surprisingly enough, The Scorpion King proved to be goofy, music, silly, and even a little campy. But most of all, it's just fun. Johnson knows he's a terrible actor, but he manages to infuse so much charisma into his performance. It almost makes up for the fact that he couldn't act his way out of a paper bag upon entering a harem filled with beautiful women. His raised eyebrows says more than any dialogue he could. The rest of the cast is mostly forgettable, especially an awkwardly placed comic relief sidekick. How out of place is he? The character doesn't even have a name. But let's face it, everyone going to see The Scorpion King wants to see The Rock. While both Mummy films were filmed abroad in exotic locations like Morocco and Egypt, The Scorpion King was shot entirely in Arizona. But considering a good portion of the movie takes place in the desert, it doesn't seem too conspicuous. Chuck Russell, best known for directing The Blob and The Mask, takes over the reins and does an admirable job. The climactic battle resembles something out of Star Wars. Music. With 3 separate fights occurring at the same time, Russell keeps the pace brisk, though with some unnecessary subplots added to beef up the running time. No doubt, tend to slow things down. So, while hardcore fans of the first 2 Mummy films will likely be disappointed in the lack of big special effects, The Scorpion King is nevertheless entertaining enough to warrant a cheap mania. But this review request serves 2 purposes. The first is that it's a trilogy and one that by the end of these reviews will probably make the Jurassic Park trilogy look so much better. The second purpose it serves is to knock out another review request from co-worker Eric. Today's movie is not the movie that was requested, but the first part in the trilogy. Eric suggested that I review the third movie, which will most likely be awful. I decided to watch all 3 so that I don't get left out of the highly cerebral storyline. Well, let's jump into it. The first movie in this trilogy is a spin-off of another movie franchise called The Mummy. Making this movie The Scorpion King, written by Stephen Sommers, William Osborne, and David Hayter. Directed by Chuck Russell and starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Stephen Brand, Kelly Hu, Michael Clark Duncan, Bernard Hill, Grant Heslov, Peter Finley, Rance Richmond, Roger E., Ralph Muller, and Tyler Maine. The Ewadons are the baddest group of assassins in the land. The last 3 remaining Ewadons, Mathayus the Rock, his half-brother Jessup, Rance Richmond, and some other random dude hired by King Fran, Roger E. to kill the sorcerer that is bringing victory to the Egyptian Emperor Menin. Stephen Brand with her prophetic powers. The 3 Ewadons get into Menin's camp and are instantly ambushed. Having been betrayed by King Fran's son, Tuckmid, Peter Finelli, Mathayus escapes the ambush, but the other 2 Ewadons fall. Mathayus gets into the tent of the sorcerer, but finds that it is not some old dude as you'd expect. Instead, it's super hot Cassandra Kelly Menin and his troops enter the tent and capture Mathayus, but Cassandra predicts that horrible things will happen to Menin if he orders Mathayus executed. Instead, Mathayus is sentenced to be buried in the sand and Havens eat his head along with horse thief Grant Heslov. Together, they escape and Mao sets his sights on getting revenge on Menon. Much like the majority of the movies that this movie spun off from, he found this movie to be a lot of fun. It's not particularly smart or well written, but it's fun and has some great fight scenes in it. And since that should be what you expect when going into a movie like this, you should be fairly satisfied. The opening of the movie serves little purpose to the story and is only there to show that the Rock is a badass. He's just going in and saving his brother from some small group of people that are going to kill him, and he does with extreme prejudice. Immediately afterwards, this scene is completely forgotten about because, as Ia said, it had nothing to do with the story, music but it was a pretty badass fight. Ida sets up how badass the Rock is by having him inexplicably climbing up a cliff with a giant boulder attached to his back, the point of which I still don't know. Then he drops him through the chimney, emerges from a cloud of smoke, and whoops ass on everyone in the tent single-handedly. He even knocks someone out by wrapping his bow around their head, pulling Ida taut, and letting it snap on their face. That's the international sign of a badass. The movie's actual story picks up right after this scene. It's a decent story without any surprises, but it's mainly just set up for more fights. It's a basic tale of revenge that is then superseded by taking out an evil ruler for the greater good. Then you throw a little love story in the middle. But the action and the fights are fun. Some of the dialogue borders on clever, while the other parts of the dialogue are just cheesy, like at the end of the Clash of the Titans, The Rock and Michael Clark Duncan, where The Rock says, "We are brothers in the same cause and should probably be given an award for delivering that line while keeping a straight face." It's the kind of movie that you just need to shut your brain off and look at all the pretty colors. If you don't, you may get bothered by the fact that they totally ripped off Indiana Jones by having him cut the giant gong thing off and rolling it out at the window to escape a hail of arrows. The performances accomplished what Thea came to do. Personally, I like watching The Rock. I don't know if everyone feels it the same as I do, but that guy's so charismatic, and above that, he's so much better at a fake ass kicking than most action movie stars. One person I like watching way more than The Rock is Kelly Hugunam. That's a good-looking bird, and the movie features her in one of two phases, A nearly naked and completely naked. Yeah, you don't see anything because of how strategically placed hair, but I'm okay with it. I know that Michael Clarke Duncan can really bring it in the acting department, but he left it at home for this movie. He didn't need his acting chops for this movie. It seems like he likes to just do a couple of dumb movies that he'll have fun with, and that's what he did here. I never really believed Stephen Brand as a badass. You just can't see this unimpressive white-haired boy being a threat to The Rock. It's a kind of the same thing they did in the Shanghai Nights, where they decided the bad guy would be this unimpressive white-haired guy. So they just said that he was the greatest sword fighter ever, so you have to just give it a pass. An unimpressive story and some corny dialogue does very little to remove this movie from the soft spot in my heart that I still needed to get a doctor to look at. Good action, fun times, and an appealing cast, including The Rock in his first starring role and super hot Kelly, who makes the movie enjoyable. I actually purchased it this twice, but I'm not saying that also cause for you to purchase it at least once. I just upgraded to Blu-ray. I cannot promise that you will have the same kind of fun with this movie as I did, but it's at least worth watching. The Scorpion King gets I'll kill half, you kill half out of no need for concern, miss. When the assignment to review The Scorpion King came down the pike, I realized I needed to do a bit of homework. I'd never bothered to see The Mummy Returns, the Steven Sommers-directed sequel to his 1999 surprise hit, The Mummy. Not that I hated the previous film, but I wasn't enamored enough with it to care about the sequel. So, I took a pass both in the theater and on video. However, as The Scorpion King came my way, I realized I needed to check out that previous film since I'd introduced the WWF's The Rock as the mythical character. My DVD viewing of The Mummy Returns was a surprise on two accounts. 1. I was amazed at the extent to which the sequel was pretty much exactly the same film as the original, only more so. As in bigger and more expensive. And secondly, and more important to the discussion of The Scorpion King, music. I was surprised that The Rock and his character had so little screen time in the flick, based on what I'd heard and the fact that Universal saw fit to spin him off into a prequel. I'd always been under the impression that he was a major player in The Mummy Returns. There's no question, however, that as the title might indicate, The Scorpion King I saw pretty much all The Rock. I'm not a viewer, so even though I was aware of him, there's a large bloated hole in the movie storyline that conflicts with the Mummy's storyline. The movie is said to take place before the pyramids were built. This is when the Scorpion King was alive. The pyramids weren't built for another 100 years, so the Scorpion King at that time would have to be very old or dead. In The Mummy Returns, he's clearly young and healthy and becomes the evil demon guy. That's just one of the many flaws. Let's pick one out of the hat. The acting is bad. We have The Rock, who raises a brow and growls at every moment he gets, attempting to make the wretched dialogue believable. Uta fails miserably. He's likable. Uta barely even believable with his hilarious long hair. It's hard to imagine he turning into the evil Scorpion King. Which I won't waste my time with because there won't be a sequel. Kelly, who cannot display her acting or martial arts chops, because all she does in this is spout corny dialogue and stand half naked. Not that I'm complaining. She's never fully naked, though. No, she's naked enough to attract attention from the target audience, but her hair is always surprisingly down on her chest covering her breasts. Even when she's sliding down a waterfall, the rest of the characters are so limited. Especially in Michael Clarke Duncan, who is a great actor, but is oddly out of place and does barely anything in this movie to begin with. He appears sometimes to speak a dramatic monologue, Throwdown in a wrestling-style fight with The Rock, and battle with Mathayus. In the end, there's no emphasis on the character to make him likable, so he's a pretty dispensable. The special effects are standard with laughably computer-generated snakes here and there, music, and some poorly constructed fiery scenes. The fighting is nothing new and failed to impress me at all. A lot of it reminded me of the Conan movies, never making anything original or breathtaking. It looks like the choreographer copied a lot of the fight moves from old barbarian movies. A lot of the choreography is so slow and annoying, it's hard to enjoy any of it at all. They also tend to exaggerate a lot of the scenes. At one point, it seems The Rock's character is so powerful that whenever he shoots his arrow at a bad guy, they're thrown into walls like they were shot with cannons. It's all just so laughable. The movie's mood is all wrong. It should be dark and grimy and gritty, yet is so cheery and light-hearted, making it accessible to young boys to like, but loses the older audience in the mix. It goes without saying that this is a bad movie. But it's entertaining because of that. Come here for the cheese. Stay for Kelly who don't assassin Mathayus. Music. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is hired to kill the evil rulerman, and Stephen Brand's sorceress Kelly was able to foresee the outcome of a battle before it ever happens. The Scorpion King is a spin-off and prequel of the Mummy series. It is directed by Chuck Russell and stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who is reprising his role as the titular character of Mathayus the Scorpion King from The Mummy Returns. This movie, though not his debut, marks the first starring role for the wee superstar. Given the obvious amount of clear on-screen charisma and charm, Johnson manages to display just how clear it is that this wholly mediocre movie was able to start the transition of The Rock from pro wrestler to genuinely a movie star. With a sarcastic wit and a flashy smile, Mathayus goes on a mission for hire to kill man and sorceress. The Rock might give it his all here, but what he's working with is a clear mixed bag. There's no doubt this film exists as purely a mindless popcorn flick to appeal to 14-year-old male WWE wrestling fans. It is loaded with cheesy dialogue and a lot of over-the-top action, especially the opening action scene, which is exaggerated far beyond any of the other action in the film. With a slightly more modest budget than either of the Mummy films, The Scorpion King has far less CGI and utilizes more practical effects. However, when the movie does use CGI, it still looks pretty bad and very dated. Not giant scorpion monster in The Mummy Returns bad and dated, but bad nonetheless, and The Rock doesn't digitally raise his eyebrow. So, there's that. The practical effects range from really intricate-looking objects to cheaply made ones you might find at a party store as part of an Egyptian Halloween costume. Despite all of the faults of this flick, it does have a modicum of entertaining qualities, mostly thanks to its rising shining star. It does have the occasional, albeit unintentional, laugh and a few genuinely fun moments. It only received a modest box office success and a less than mediocre critical reception, and it also went on to spawn numerous far worse straight-to-DVD sequels, often starring random MMA fighters. In the end, the movie is relatively harmless, but it does feel unnecessarily long despite the runtime. Though it may be a nostalgic guilty pleasure for some, it definitely doesn't hold up well. Don't go into a movie like The Scorpion King looking for a depth or the answers to life's questions. And if you try to turn your brain off going into it, you'll probably have a reasonable time and enjoy it for what it is. Yeah, it seems a bit premature when you hear Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the rundown, be cool, is the Schwarzenegger for a new generation. But if you look at the kinds of films did in his beginnings, Dwayne seems right on track. The Mummy Returns is not great, but a hell of a lot better than a Hercules in New York, and both started out with sword and sorcery films. Music with Conan the Barbarian for Arnold and The Scorpion King for Dwayne. However, what the future holds for The Rock will certainly depend on wise choices, and why we can overlook the fact that The Scorpion King is a bad film in his favor. A career of these will make Mathayus Johnson seem more like the Brianna Bosworth for the new millennium. Johnson stars as Mathayus, an assassin who is hired as a last resort by some local tribes who have been suffering from run-ins with men and brand. Music. The evil warlord that wants to rule the land, Minan has been using a sorceress will cradle to the grave with powers to predict the future of his battles. And while Mathayus tries to stop Minan, he steals away his most precious of possessions, the seer herself. You can already figure that the film isn't going to be very good just by looking at the cast. Dwayne Johnson is making his starring debut. Stephen Branda's Menona comes straight from a crop of failed TV shows. Music. Director Chuck Russell is just coming off of one of the worst movies in 2000, Bless the Child, and a script that had been rewritten numerous times by hacks that haven't made very much in terms of great screenplays. The best that could have been hoped for is that the film wouldn't be the worst movie of the year. And to its credit, Ida actually succeeds. At least in not being a totally unpalatable. There are really three types of people who may want to see this. Not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I will break it down so that you may know if the Scorpion King is worthwhile for you. First, there are fans of The Rock, Dwayne's WWE alter ego, and to them, the Scorpion King may be a mixed bag. Willie Johnson actually shows some skill at pulling off the stunt work, music which he did himself, and carrying the film on his back in admirable fashion. The character is different from The Rock. And as long as you are prepared for that, you might be fine. Plus, like the WWE, the Scorpion King is merely an excuse for stunts and phony violence. And the script is about as intricate as a pro wrestling main event. This film succeeds at, if anything, showcasing Johnson's talent as action hero, so it is recommended for you. The next group of people are the fans of the Mummy series. And if you like those films, then you probably just like comic book adventures mixed with eye-popping special effects and hokey humor. Well, the Scorpion King certainly delivers in all of those areas. However, don't go expecting it to tie in any more to the Mummy, as the Scorpion King is a standalone adventure that if not for a couple of scenes in The Mummy Returns would have absolutely nothing to make you compare the two entities at all. The Mummy and the Scorpion King are both dumb, really dumb fun if you like popcorn fluff. What the hell, it should deliver for most of you. The last group is the largest and most demanding, and for which the Scorpion King will be considered a big disappointment, and that is the adventure flick fans. Yes, Willie, there are stunts, special effects, exotic clothes, and lots of action. Music. It's all held together by the flimsiest of plot lines with almost no character development to speak of, heavily plagiarizing everything from Indiana Jones to Rambo. The film is a mishmash of cliches from action films of the last 25 years with almost nothing new to speak of save the star. In fact, while there is quite a bit of impressive stunt and special effects pieces, music, they aren't thrilling in the slightest, and by the end of the film, will probably come away feeling just as empty as you were going in. Except $8 later. Bad comedy, bad drama, poor villains, historical inaccuracies, and a wafer-thin depth are all compounded to make The Scorpion King another vapid summer adventure sure to be readily digested and quickly forgotten almost as soon as the credits roll. Summing up, unless you are a huge fan of The Rock or a fanatic for the Mummy flicks, The Scorpion King just doesn't have anything fresh or exciting enough to recommend. Rather than go to the theater, why not use that $8 to rent a triple feature of Conan the Barbarian, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and First Blood? You will not only go to bed smiling, but also wake up with the nasty hangover from time and money wasted. Yeah, it seems a bit premature when you hear Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, at the rundown, be cool, is the Schwarzenegger for a new generation. But if you look at the kinds of films Ira did in his beginnings. Music. Dwayne seems right on track. The Mummy Returns is not great, but a hell of a lot better than Hercules in New York. and Bota started out with sword and sorcery films with Conan the Barbarian for Arnold and The Scorpion King for Dwayne. However, what the future holds for The Rock will certainly depend on wise choices, and why we can overlook the fact that The Scorpion King is a paid film in his favor. A career of these will make Johnson seem more like the Brianna Bosworth for the new millennium. Johnson stars as Mathayus, an assassin who is hired as a last resort by some local tribes who have been suffering from run-ins with Minenbrand, the evil warlord that wants to rule the land. Minen has been using a sorceress cradle to the grave with powers to predict the future of his battles. And while Mathayus tries to stop Minen, he steals away his most precious of possessions, the seer herself. You can requisite all goodies are here like the Okutoropian ride it up while the chandelier falls on the Bagay routine and Thea and yes shall know the evil ones by their English accents attitude. Which is to say that this is incredibly a nonsensical balderdash but damn funny and only about half unintentionally so. Yeah. Music. It swarmed over Mummy which was swarmed over Raiders of the Lost Ark but Anubis help me. It's actually a good ride that doesn't pretend to be anything more than that. The plot has something to do with the last free men and elves of Middle Ear amassing for a final assault on Sauron. No, wait. It's something to do with the last free tribes of the world joining forces for a final assault on evil overlord Manon who slaughters all who stand in his way with his CGI armies and the help of his sorceress Cassandra who can foresee the outcome of every battle. Stephen Brand, music who plays Manon, isn't Russell Crowe, but plays him on TV probably, and Kelly, who plays Cassandra, is very cute and probably has a long career ahead of her as a cellular phone company spokeswoman. The Rock is hired by the tribes to assassinate the sorceress, but of course. He is taken by her cuteness and her irresistible offers of 3,000 anytime minutes, and so he doesn't kill her. He develops a real dislike for Manon, which is ironic considering that we know that Mathayus, aka the Scorpion King, is destined to become an even worse tyrant, and so, he does get to do some killing. After all, you should probably know that there's so much wrestling in this movie that when it comes to pay-per-view, they're going to have to charge $29.95 for it. I won't reveal the unsecret ending, but we get to see it through only of the sorceress's visions halfway through the movie anyway. You don't exactly have to be a nuclear genius to guess that The Rock has to win because we need at least one sequel to explain how he turns from big fighting nice guy into Brendan Fraser's worst nightmare. Last summer's abysmal The Mummy Returns introduced audiences to the character of the Scorpion King. In that film, he was a villain. Not really a willing villain, but a villain nonetheless. One of my main problems with that earlier film was that the Scorpion King wasn't given much screen time. Now, only a year later, that problem has been rectified. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson plays Mathayus, an Arcadian assassin. He is hired to kill a sorceress employed by Manon Stephen Brand, a ruthless warlord who threatens to eradicate all of the free tribes in Egypt. The source of his power is the sorceress Cassandra Kelly who foresees Minon's victories and gives his soldiers the confidence they need to fight valiantly. When Maz is betrayed and the assassination plot foiled, he and the sorceress become unlikely Eliasa in the battle to overthrow Minon and free Egypt from his rule. This movie is a prequel to The Mummy Returns, taking place thousands of years earlier. Although there are no real connections between the films other than Mathayus, the future Scorpion King is still a hero and a do-gooder here. Some have compared The Rock's role to the first of Arnold Schwarzenegger's action roles in Conan the Barbarian. While The Rock does wield a mean sword, this film isn't as heavy-handed as that early 80s film. The Rock does seem like an Arnold light cracking on liners as he cracks some heads. But it somehow seems less corny with him doing it instead of Schwarzenegger. Maybe it's the lack of an Austrian accent. The Scorpion King doesn't take itself seriously at all, and that makes it much more enjoyable. If it were replayed straight, it would be tedious and unintentionally laughable. Director Chuck Russell ought to know what makes a Schwarzenegger tick. He directed Hyena Eraser, one of Aries' last big films. This is not a cerebral film by any means. The characters are all paper-thin, the action is fairly predictable, and the acting is just barely adequate. Still, The Scorpion King manages to be entertaining and fun thanks to the collection of personalities on screen. The Rock definitely has screen presence and charisma. He's not going to challenge Denzel Washington for any roles, but he's action film good. Steven Brand. Music, who's mainly been in TV roles, makes a decent slimy villain. Michael Clarke Duncan, best known for The Green Mile, makes the most of his role as a powerful Nubian warrior and brings plenty of presence to the screen. Kelly Hu, whose earlier work included Surf Ninjas and Nash Bridges, contributes more with her striking screen presence than her acting, but somehow it fits the film's light-hearted tone. The costume designers also deserve credit for creatively keeping her character within the limits of a PG-13 rating without sacrificing the movie's adventurous style. Overall, The Scorpion King isn't a film that stands out for its originality, acting, visual effects, or award-worthy achievements. However, it succeeds where it matters most. It delivers exactly what audiences expect from a summer blockbuster. It's a fun, action-packed adventure that doesn't take itself too seriously, making it an enjoyable choice for anyone looking for a straightforward night of entertainment. With the success of Dwayne Johnson's memorable appearance in The Mummy Returns, it was only natural for filmmakers to build a spin-off around his character. Set around 3000 BC, The Scorpion King serves as a prequel, following Mathayus, a skilled Akkadian assassin who eventually rises to become the ruler of an ancient kingdom. During this era, the ruthless warlord Memnon, played by Steven Brand, dominates the land with the help of Cassandra, a gifted sorceress portrayed by Kelly Hu. Her ability to foresee the future allows Memnon to win battles before they even begin. As his campaign of conquest spreads across the region, the few remaining free tribes unite in a desperate attempt to stop him. They hire Mathayus and his brother to assassinate Cassandra, believing that eliminating her visions will end Memnon's unstoppable advance. Armed with an impressive arsenal of weapons and unmatched combat skills, Mathayus fights his way deep into the enemy camp. When he finally reaches Cassandra, her beauty catches him off guard, causing a brief hesitation that changes everything. Instead of killing her, he escapes with her, forcing the pair into a dangerous journey across the desert while Memnon's army relentlessly pursues them. Like the Mummy films, The Scorpion King features plenty of action and violence. Characters are stabbed, slashed, hanged, and struck down with arrows and swords. Although the bloodshed remains relatively mild, the dangers don't stop there, as flesh-eating ants, venomous snakes, and deadly quicksand add even more peril throughout the adventure. The film also continues the franchise's tradition of revealing costumes, though body paint has largely been replaced with fabric. Female characters, including a group of warrior women, wear minimal outfits with strategically designed costumes that stay just within PG-13 guidelines. Despite its flaws, The Scorpion King offers an entertaining experience. Some viewers even find it more enjoyable than The Mummy and The Mummy Returns because it embraces a stronger sense of humor, colorful visuals, and several memorable action sequences. While it loses some of the campy B-movie charm of its predecessors, it compensates with energetic set pieces and a playful attitude. By the film's conclusion, Dwayne Johnson fully embraces his larger-than-life hero image, looking every bit like the cover star of a fantasy adventure novel. Among the highlights are a cleverly staged peasant boy sequence that pays tribute to silent film comedy, several female-led battle scenes that give the women meaningful action roles, and an exciting sandstorm and quicksand climax that stands out as one of the movie's best moments. Kelly Hu also delivers a memorable performance as Cassandra, whose mystical abilities and mysterious presence add to the film's fantasy atmosphere. Not everything works, however. Some of the post-fight one-liners feel forced, and lines like, "You're lucky we have the same mother," or "Rivers of blood can never bring peace," come across as overly predictable. Certain supporting characters, particularly the comic sidekick, rely on jokes that often miss the mark. Camel jokes and awkward humor interrupt the pacing rather than enhancing it, and a few performances lack the charisma needed to match the film's energetic action. Even with these shortcomings, The Scorpion King remains an entertaining popcorn movie. It's designed for audiences looking for fast-paced action, light humor, and simple adventure rather than deep storytelling. As the summer movie season begins earlier than ever with an April release, this spin-off from the Mummy franchise delivers exactly what it promises: an enjoyable, action-filled escape that never pretends to be anything more. Dwayne Johnson, better known as The Rock, was a former University of Miami football player who set out to become the next muscle-bound action star for a new generation, much like Arnold Schwarzenegger did in the mid-1980s. Based on this performance, Johnson shows about the same level of acting ability that Schwarzenegger displayed during his early action film years. Take that however you like, but it gives you a fair idea of what to expect. The Scorpion King is essentially a big-budget B-movie, and that's perfectly fine as long as you go into it with the right expectations. It's a fast-paced film with a runtime of just over 90 minutes, so it rarely gives viewers a chance to get bored. The story follows a warrior battling an evil ruler, Memnon, and his powerful sorceress as they spread destruction across North Africa. But honestly, does the plot really matter? Not particularly. This movie is all about action, packed with over-the-top fight scenes and plenty of cheesy, eye-roll-inducing humor. If you're looking for non-stop entertainment rather than deep storytelling, it delivers exactly that. After all, what defines a summer action movie? Usually, it's an impressive body count, and The Scorpion King certainly doesn't disappoint. Countless warriors meet brutal ends through sword fights, impalements, and explosive battles. The Rock effortlessly tears through waves of enemy soldiers while repeatedly flashing the signature raised eyebrow that made him a global wrestling superstar. The climactic battle is filled with wrestling-style spectacle, from flaming swords to dramatic comebacks and even dirty fighting tactics like throwing ash into an opponent's eyes. It's exaggerated, ridiculous, and surprisingly entertaining. Of course, the filmmakers conveniently ignore the fact that The Mummy Returns portrays the Scorpion King as a ruthless conqueror obsessed with world domination. Kelly Hu, who plays the mysterious sorceress, brings both charm and screen presence to the role. The film gives her plenty of glamorous moments, though, as expected from a PG-13 production, everything remains carefully covered by strategically placed hair and costume design. Michael Clarke Duncan, fresh off his acclaimed performance in The Green Mile, is the film's other recognizable face. Here, he fully embraces the B-movie style, delivering a performance that's loud, exaggerated, and intentionally over the top. Whether that's a sign of limited material or simply the tone of the film is open to debate. Given his dramatic talent, it's hard not to wish Hollywood had offered him more serious roles instead of relying on his imposing physique for action films. Meanwhile, Stephen Brand makes for a satisfyingly villainous Memnon, fully embracing the role of the ruthless tyrant. The film also includes some tongue-in-cheek humor and deliberately old-fashioned attitudes toward gender, reflecting the style of many action movies from that era. While some of those jokes feel dated today, they are presented as part of the film's campy, larger-than-life personality rather than its central appeal. Directed by Chuck Russell, the film features a screenplay by Stephen Sommers, who also developed the story. It was produced by Sean Daniel and stars Dwayne Johnson in his first leading film role. The cinematography is by John Arlanetti, with editing by Greg Parsons and a musical score composed by John Debney. Produced by WWF Entertainment and distributed by Universal Pictures, The Scorpion King was released on April 19, 2002. The film runs for 92 minutes, is produced in the United States, and is presented in English. Made on a budget of $60 million, it went on to earn approximately $178.8 million at the worldwide box office, making it a commercial success.